Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Finance and Audit Committee meeting. This is a Board of Directors Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Welcome, and Mr. Secretary, can we call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller. Director Gometti. Director, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we start with public comment. Mr. Secretary, do we have anybody who would like to address the committee this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Before we begin public comment for the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting, I would like to go over some important information for members of the public who have joined us in person and wish to provide public comment. You will be called upon in the order that we have received your card. If you're joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on your screen to allow the microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, we will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chairman, at this time, we don't have any public speakers, in-person speakers, but we have one phone, one call-in speaker.
Our challenge today, and that one piece of equipment there is not working, so you don't normally stumble like that, but I wanted to make the excuse for you anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The Zoom speaker is Roland.
Good morning, Roland.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Richards and board members. I just want to quickly take this opportunity to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is all the speakers this morning.
Well, thank you. Then we will begin our agenda for this morning. We're joined by our Chief Auditor, Ms. Rivera. Oh, yeah, I'll do minutes first, but you could sit for 1 second. All right, we had a meeting on November the 2nd. Do we have any changes, additions, or deletions? If approval, a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Chair Richards.
Yes.
Director Camacho.
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller. Director Gometti. Mr. Chairman, the
Okay,
measure
thank
carries.
you. Paula, please join us. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair Richards and committee members. I'm Paula Rivera.
I don't know if you can get a little closer to your microphone. That would be helpful.
Height is not my problem. Good morning. I'm Paula Rivera. I'm the Chief Auditor with the California High-Speed Rail Authority. And I'm here today with 2 reports for pre-award evaluations that we've done of procurements that were in process at the time we performed them. So a little bit of background. A pre-award is performed when an agreement for architectural and engineering services is to be awarded based on qualifications. So we are looking at the costs proposed, and this work is done prior to contract execution. Once a notice of intent, or notice of award, is prepared, we work with the most qualified team to obtain information about the costs that they've proposed, and the team that's been organized. We request some information, indirect rate support, payroll, other direct cost support, as part of an initial submission. And based on that initial submission, we move forward with the pre-award. So as we've noted in the 2 different memos, The initial submission was incomplete, but we've worked with the teams to provide all the information that we've requested. And in a couple of cases, there were small firms that didn't have their indirect rate yet, due to the extension of the taxes this year in California to October. But all the issues are addressed before a contract is executed. So as is common, the types of issues we find are things that benefit the firms and benefit the authority. We get a good cost proposal that's based on actual costs before the contract begins. For the heavy maintenance facility environmental work contract, we evaluated 89% of the proposed costs. And we found some issues related to indirect rates, a little bit of timing, prior year indirect rates, but nothing that I feel like is material or should have prevented the contract from moving forward. The other report that I have today is for the RESES, Rail Systems Engineering Services. For that contract, we had audit resources available to look at 97% of the cost proposed. And again, the issues we found were things that needed to be corrected in the cost proposed prior to execution, but nothing that I feel should prevent the contract from moving forward. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Paula? Paula, just a question. Over the years, as we've noticed, when people do submit, they've got indirect costs, or they've got whatever costs that they put into their proposals that need to be adjusted. Why is that? Is there some sort of indoctrination that the contractors and subcontractors go through first, so they know what's acceptable and not acceptable? Or why is it that if you weren't doing this, we would potentially be signing contracts that were either contracts potentially could be overpaid? I haven't noted many that were underpaid, but what's the reason for that?
I have to give you my audit answer, as it depends.
Okay.
That's my answer for everything. It depends on the sophistication of the company and the experience in working with other governmental agencies. If we see a firm that's worked with Caltrans and Water Resources and maybe VTA or BART, then they have a lot of experience with the federal regulations and indirect rates. And so then it's just a quick check to see that we're of all the same understanding. If it's a firm that's not done work with the government before, especially in an actual cost situation where they can't just bill commercial rates, then it's an education process. And that's where I feel like the pre-award is very valuable, is we have an opportunity to educate those smaller, not necessarily smaller firms, but firms that don't interact with the government often. And so we can get them started in the right direction, understand what an adequate accounting system is, what's necessary to be able to support their billings. And then once a contract is executed, we offer a presentation to the prime and all the subs about the specifics of the indirect rates. So once you're under contract, then we have a presentation that goes through resources that are available, how to calculate an indirect rate, what sort of information you need, timesheets, trial balances, that sort of thing. So the pre-award really just kind of helps us set the stage.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paula. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All right, Chief Financial Officer. Good morning, Mr. Annis.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. I'm going to present the financial report, which is data through September 30th, and a few updates beyond that as well. We start the report with accounts payable, aging, and disputes on the top of the page you're looking at. We note that disputes are down about $43 million. Of course, the bulk of our disputes involve a single contract, the Dragados Flatiron contract. And the reason it's down is, as was reported in last month's CEO report, there's a number of new change orders executed, and some of the disputes involve those, so that reduced the disputes number. Additionally, there were no late payments made in the reporting month, and we've had now an 80-month, over 6.5-year record of no late payments that incur a late payment penalty. At the bottom of the page, we indicate our cash balances. And the Prop 1A bond balance at the end of September, $408 million. This does not yet reflect the proceeds from the fall bond sale, where $300 million of additional Prop 1A bonds have been sold. So in the next or subsequent board report, you'll see that $300 million bond sale be added to these numbers. In terms of cap and trade, the balance at the end of September was little under 2.5 billion. That does not yet reflect the 217 million from the August cap and trade sale, although post September we did receive that funds in our account. And we had a November bond sale, a November cap and trade auction. And the estimated proceeds from that were $355 million, which is an all-time high for the program. And I'll maybe to compare and contrast a little bit, the August bond sale, I'm sorry, I said it again, the August cap and trade auction being at 216 million was actually higher than that, but it's the August is when Department of Finance typically does off-the-top adjustments for various statutory provisions that take some money out of the cap and trade program for fire prevention and other programs. So they took out approximately $90 million that we would have otherwise gotten prior to our 25% allotment of cap and trade proceeds. So finance ended up taking the full adjustment in the August auction. And so that means when we get to the November auction, there's no offsets because they've already taken care of that for the whole fiscal year. But again, very robust cap and trade amounts from the last two auctions that would really far exceed $1 billion a year pace, approaching really $1.2 billion type of figure. If these, last two auctions are representative of how we look going forward.
Brian, why is there a reason why it was so high, the auction?
Yes, it's really the settlement price of the allowances. So the settlement price in the auction was about $38 per allowance. When the cap and trade program began more than a decade ago, the prices were more like $12 an allowance. So and this $38 mark is above the minimum price that the Air Board sets. Every year they do reduce the number of allowances that are offered for sale. So it's that market pressure that industry either has to figure out how to reduce emissions, and if they can't, the auction mechanism is going to push prices up. And so that's what's happening. Next slide, please. The administrative budget reports, we expended about 5.8 million in September. So that's about 21% of our annual budget, with about 25% of the fiscal year completed. So we're tracking a little bit under our budget for administration expenses. We do have a record high now of filled state positions. We have 361 state staff at the authority currently, and 68 vacancies. And next slide, please. So our capital report for the month of September, the monthly expenditures were 123 million. Of that, the design build contracts specifically were about 87 million, with CP1 at 34 million, 2-3 at 31 million, and CP4 at about 22 million. We are tracking fairly close to budget as we discussed last month. Here with 25% of the fiscal year completed, we've spent about 24.2% of the capital budget. Again, I think that may fall a bit going forward, but we're definitely tracking closer to our budget, our forecast budget in our expenditures than we have in past years due to additional attention to how we set the fiscal year budget. Next slide, please. So total program expenditures cumulatively since 2006 are now approaching $11.7 billion on the top table. And at the bottom table, we do indicate our awarded federal grants through the recent award of the CRISI grant of $202 million. So we're a little bit under $3.8 billion of federal grants. And of course, there was some news yesterday that Mr. Kelly will talk about more in the full board in terms of grant awards. Next slide. Contracts and expenditures. We tick up a bit in terms of number of contracts that are active at the authority from 198 to 201 contracts. And the value of those active contracts is up from about 11.9 billion to about 12 billion. And most of that increase was due to some change orders enacted for the design build contracts. That was about 140 million of that total. We do include a new table on this PowerPoint slide at the bottom, small business utilization. So based on the discussion at last month's board meeting, we added a table to be a little more detailed on our small business reporting. And of course, the board adopted a new policy last month for how we set our small business goals by individual program. But as that's a new policy, we don't have much to report yet on the what the contract percentages will ultimately be under that new policy. So, but as indicated here, bottom line is we're fairly close to meeting all the goals on the professional services side with a total of 28.2% overall small business utilization. That's the bottom right of the table, with the design build contracts that are the bulk of our dollars. They're coming in about 23% overall, which is plateaued for a few years, but is certainly up from our figures we were seeing 6 or 7 years ago of about 16%. And in total, we do have about 282 we have 812 small businesses actively working on the high-speed rail, obviously, primarily subcontractors, and those include about 282 disadvantaged business enterprises and 99 certified disadvantaged veteran business enterprises. Next slide, please. This is our contingency summary. So we reported in the month of September, 19.1 million of contingency usage for smaller change orders. And then when the change order exceeds 25 million, we report that individually at the bottom of the slide. So there was a $48.3 million change order for CP23. That was an interim time extension, and that was discussed as well in the last month's board meeting as part of the CEO report. Our remaining balance of contingency is on the right of the top table. So we have about 1.6 billion remaining of contingency for the 3 CPs. And then other contingencies are program-wide unallocated, other special reserves, a total about 955 million. And lastly, next slide and last slide, we have our preliminary numbers for October. For October, the capital expenditures are coming in at almost $200 million overall. The construction package design build contractors total about 166 million, largest of those being the CP1 at 112 million. That is higher in part due to one of those change orders detailed last month for the time impact and escalation of CP1. So about 66 million of that 112 million for construction package 1 was related to the payment of those two time-related change orders that were discussed previously. And then about 20 million of the expenditures last month were for work outside of the construction packages. So some of the environmental work and bookend projects, et cetera. And Mr. Chair, that completes the financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Annis. Any questions for our CFO? We have none. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a very short meeting today. We're not going to have the Central Valley update because we're going to have a construction update in our board meeting, which begins at 9:30. And so rather than deal with that here on a more bifurcated approach, we have decided to have this all handled by our CEO and his team in the board meeting at 9:30. So with that being stated, that is the agenda for today. Any comments or questions from any of? Okay.
I just wanted to point out too, Brian, that was I'm glad you added that on the DB utilization. That chart is very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Then, ladies and gentlemen, with that, the committee meeting is over and we will see you all here at 9:30. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.